There is a mask you wear not once a year at a costume party, but every day. You put it on when you wake up, when you check your notifications, when you walk out the door and into the world. It's the version of you that knows how to smile on cue, speak in trending hashtags, and never ever say the wrong thing. But the real question is, are you still beneath it? Carl Jung, one of the great architects of depth psychology, called this mask the persona. It is, as he wrote, a kind of mask designed on the one hand to make a definite impression upon others and on the other to conceal the true nature of the individual. Let that sink in. To conceal, not to express, not to reveal, but to hide. In a digital age where your self is curated like an art exhibit, captions rewritten, filters applied, opinions softened for broader appeal, the persona has grown from a social necessity into a full blown performance. We live not only with the mask but often in it, forgetting it was ever a costume, and that forgetting, that is the beginning of the trap. Let's go back not to Freud or to Jung just yet, but to something even more basic: childhood. From a young age, we learn that certain behaviors are rewarded: smiling, being polite, showing talent, hiding anger. We start to shape ourselves according to what gains approval, whether from parents, teachers, or peers. And slowly we craft a version of ourselves that fits the mold of acceptable. At first it's survival, then it becomes habit, and eventually it becomes identity. Jung saw this development as inevitable. The persona is not evil. In fact, it's useful, xenopor, even essential. Without a social mask, you couldn't function in society. It lets you play roles: teacher, student, friend, employee, lover, leader. But when we believe the role is all we are, we sever the cord that ties us to the deeper self. We become trapped in performance and strangers to our own soul. He warned, the persona is a compromise between the individual and society as to what a man should appear to be. But it is only a mask of the collective psyche, a mask that feigns individuality. Now, fast forward to now, to you, here in this era of digital mirrors. Ask yourself, do you edit your personality for likes? Do you fear expressing unpopular opinions because of the fallout? Do you feel more real online than offline, or less? Have you ever felt hollow after presenting the perfect version of yourself? These aren't superficial questions, these are existential ones. The persona once lived in real world interactions. Today it's alive and viral. We construct identities online with obsessive precision: aesthetic Instagram pages, LinkedIn profiles that read like resumes of greatness, TikTok personas built around bite sized quirks. But with every like we earn for our mask, the deeper self, like the messy, raw, contradictory self, recedes a little further into the dark. And what happens when your audience loves the mask, but you begin to hate it? In Jungian psychology, the danger of over identifying with the persona is disconnection from the unconscious, especially the self, that deeper integrated wholeness we are meant to become. When we become fixated on the persona, we suffer a fragmentation of the psyche. Depression, anxiety, imposter syndrome, numbness, they often point to the gap between who we truly are and who we are pretending to be. It's why you can have 10,000 followers and still feel deeply alone. It's why burnout doesn't always come from too much work, but from too much pretending. And it's why Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires confronting the mask, even breaking it. That journey begins when we ask a terrifying yet liberating question: if I am not this persona, then who am I? You see, the persona gives safety, but at a cost. It ensures social approval, but may sacrifice truth. It's easy to keep pretending, harder to peel back the layers and face what lies beneath. But only beneath the mask do we find vitality, creativity, love, shadow, desire, fear, the human condition in its full, unfiltered state. In Modern Man in Search of a Soul, Jung observed, every calling or profession has its own characteristic persona. It is a matter of practical necessity, but the danger is that people become identical with their personas. The professor with his textbook, the artist with his art, the journalist with his style. Then the damage is done. The man becomes a kind of hollow, shallow automaton. We become hollow when we lose the tension between the mask and the face. We become shallow when we forget that our value isn't only in how we appear, but in who we are. But here's the thing. The persona doesn't disappear by force. It unravels gently through awareness, through questioning, through recognizing when you're smiling not out of joy but out of obligation, when you're saying yes because it's what's expected is not what you mean, when the applause comes and you feel nothing inside. That's when you know the mask is winning, and that's when the work begins. This is the opening to our journey into the persona trap. In the next chapter, we'll dive deeper into how the persona takes shape in modern life, in the workplace, on social media, even in relationships. We'll explore the subtle signs that you are over identifying with your mask, and the silent consequences that accumulate when you do. Because the question isn't just, are you living a lie? The deeper question is, what part of you had to die in order to live that lie? There's a strange hunger beneath the surface of our modern lives, one we don't talk about out loud, but which shapes nearly everything we do. It's not hunger for food or love or even success. It's the hunger to be liked, and not just liked, admired, validated, followed, respected, but above all accepted. Carl Jung's idea of the persona was never just about theater, masks, or ancient symbolism. He was describing a social instinct or a psychic mechanism evolved for survival. To live in society, we must play roles. That's not inherently bad. The problem arises when the role becomes our prison, when the applause becomes our addiction, when we forget the stage lights will one day dim. In Jung's words, the persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself as well as others think one is. Think about that. A double deception. Others believe it, and so do you. And here's where the trap tightens. We live in a world of constant performance. Scroll through Instagram and you'll see perfect lives framed in perfect light. Smiles, adventures, sculpted bodies, curated meals. The modern persona is no longer just how you act, it's how you brand yourself. There's a word for this now: personal branding. You are your own PR team. You write the copy. You pose for the press photos. You manage the crisis when something real slips through, but this comes at a cost. When your image becomes your livelihood, when the approval of others becomes the currency of your self-worth, you begin to fear authenticity. You fear failure. You fear silence. You fear being seen not as your persona, but as yourself. Let's make this tangible. Let's talk about the places the persona dominates our lives, not in theory, but in flesh and blood. The workplace persona. You're the dependable one, the achiever, the leader, the one who never complains. But underneath, you're exhausted, number burned out. You've built a mask of competence so flawless that no one even thinks to ask how you're really doing. You over-deliver because you're afraid of being exposed as a fraud, even if you've never once failed. Welcome to imposter syndrome, a modern epidemic of people so buried in their personas they've forgotten their own competence. Jung didn't call it burnout. He called it one-sidedness. One becomes neurotic when one tries to be somebody one is not. We're not machines. We are contradiction and chaos and emotion and instinct, but the persona smooths that out, sandpapers it clean. It tells you to be polished, consistent, always on, and so we suffer. The relationship persona. Here's where the persona can be most subtle and certain and most destructive. You present yourself in dating and friendships as someone agreeable, attractive, emotionally stable, mysterious but not distant, honest but not too intense. You're a walking balance beam. But what happens when you fall in love while wearing the mask? You find yourself thinking, do they love me or the version of me I showed them? It's a terrifying realization that your intimacy is built on performance, not presence. You laughed when you didn't want to. You said you were fine when you weren't. You played small to seem likable. You played smart to seem safe. The persona in love doesn't seek connection, it seeks validation, and it will trade depth for acceptance every time. The social media persona nowhere is the persona more inflated and more fragile than online. Every post is a product, every thought is algorithm tested, every photo is a projection of a life that may not even exist. You don't show your panic attack, your loneliness, your grief, you show the highlights, or you show curated vulnerability as a single tear, beautifully lit. And here's the paradox. We are more ourselves online than ever before, and yet more disconnected from our inner lives than ever before. Jung warned of this long before social media existed. A persona is only a mask of the collective psyche, a mask that feigns individuality. It's not really you they like, it's the projection. So what happens when the persona succeeds? When the mask is liked, applauded, promoted, followed, that's when the trap closes fully tran because you start to believe the mask is better than you. You begin to fear that your real self, with its flaws and shadows and doubts, will only ruin the illusion. So you hide. And the more you hide, the more alone you become, even as your visibility increases. This is the paradox of modern identity. More visible, less known, more liked, less loved. That's the wound the persona creates, and over time it festers. Let's pause here and ask, what's the way out? Not through rejection of the persona. That's another trap. You can't live without some form of it. We all have roles to play. The key is not to mistake the role for the soul. The real work, Jung taught, is integration. You recognize the mask, you use it when needed, but you stay rooted in your inner truth. You allow contradiction. You tolerate discomfort. You trust that your worth isn't conditional on applause. You start to say things like, I don't know. That hurt me. I'm not okay today. This isn't who I want to be. And when you say these things and someone stays, that's when you begin to heal. When the mask breaks. Opening tone, raw, introspective, slowly building toward clarity. It doesn't always happen with a bang. Sometimes it starts with silence, a stillness that feels unfamiliar. You've been performing for so long, smiling, achieving, pleasing, that when the audience leaves and the curtain falls, there's nothing left but a quiet ache in your chest, a question that won't go away. Who am I when no one's watching? This is the beginning of collapse. Jung called it a psychic disintegration, but don't let the term scare you. It's not the end of you. In fact, it might be the first time you meet yourself. He writes, people wear a persona for the same reason that people wear clothes. It's a protective covering. But when the covering becomes your skin, You no longer know where the mask ends and you begin. At some point, and it happens to almost everyone, the mask no longer fits. It starts to suffocate. You feel it when you're in a meeting and every word you say feels like a lie. When you're surrounded by friends but your laugh feels hollow. When your perfectly edited life online becomes unbearable to maintain. And then, sometimes gradually, sometimes in a moment, the persona breaks. This breaking often takes the form of a crisis, not always dramatic, sometimes it's a whisper, not a scream. Maybe you're diagnosed with anxiety or depression, but deep down you sense it's not chemical, it's existential. Maybe you quit a job everyone admired because you can no longer pretend it fulfills you. Maybe you end a relationship where you've played a role for so long you don't even know what love feels like anymore. This collapse is painful. You may feel lost, empty, disoriented, as if everything that defined you is gone. And you're right, because everything that defined your persona is gone. But everything that defines you is just beginning to emerge. Carl Jung believed that these moments of inner collapse were not failures, but initiations. They are the beginning of a deeper psychological process. The individuation journey, the process of becoming who you really are, not just who you were taught to be. Jung writes, "We cannot change anything unless we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. Only that which is truly oneself has the power to transform. But here's the paradox of transformation. Before the true self can emerge, the false self must die. And we don't let it go easily. You'll grieve the persona, even if it made you miserable. You'll miss the certainty of knowing who you were supposed to be. Even if it was a lie, you'll feel naked, vulnerable, sometimes even crazy. But this disorientation is not madness, it is rebirth. Imagine this, you're in a play. You've played the same character for years. You know the lines, the gestures, the reactions. The audience loves you, the critics rave. But then one night, mid-scene, you forget your lines. You pause. You realize you've never actually said anything that wasn't written for you. And in that moment, terrifying and liberating, you step off the stage. Now you're in the real world. No spotlight, no applause, just you. And you're not sure who you are. But at least you're no longer pretending. These are the symptoms of a persona collapse. Existential fatigue, a deep tiredness no sleep can fix. Identity confusion, you no longer recognize the roles you once embraced. Emotional volatility, because repressed feelings are finally surfacing. Withdrawal, a desire to disappear, not out of depression, but as a way to find silence and clarity. You might think something's wrong with you. You're not broken, you're becoming whole. In this liminal space between the old self and the true self lies your real power. The persona was static, polished, performative, but your inner self, it's alive, messy, contradictory, real. It weeps and rages and dances and doubts. It longs and fears and creates and destroys. It is human, and you are finally meeting it. Jung never promised this would be easy. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But the path to that privilege, it goes straight through the ruins of the persona. So what do you do now, when the mask has broken? You don't rush to build a new one. You don't patch up the old one. You sit with the fragments, you gather them gently, you ask what each piece once protected. You honor the version of yourself that tried so hard to be loved. And then you begin the slow, sacred work of listening inward. The shadow beneath the smile. Opening tone haunting but hopeful, peeling back the layers. Once the mask cracks, something stirs beneath it. Not just truth, not just freedom, something darker, something wild, strange, even threatening. This is the shadow. Carl Jung described it as the part of the psyche we reject, not because it's evil, but because it doesn't fit the image of who we think we should be. The shadow holds everything we exile: anger, envy, vulnerability, sexuality, fear, even deep joy and unapproved genius. Everyone carries a shadow, Jung wrote, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. So long as you're living through your persona, curated, polished, likable, the shadow has no place. It threatens the illusion, it reveals contradictions, and that is precisely why it must be welcomed. Imagine your persona as a well lit stage, controlled, rehearsed. Now imagine a door behind the curtain, where all the parts of you that weren't allowed to perform are locked away. The shadow is what waits behind that door. That time you felt rage but were told to calm down. That moment of grief you swallowed so you wouldn't appear dramatic. That impulse, that fantasy, that urge, labeled bad, weird, too much, not enough. So you smiled, you complied, you became likable. But behind the smile, a storm was building. When the persona collapses, that door begins to creak open. At first, it's terrifying. You may feel overwhelmed by smauerkon, my son, by emotion, confusion, or buried memories. You may lash out, fall silent, spiral inward. This is the shadow surfacing, raw, unfiltered, and utterly human. But what if the shadow is not your enemy? What if it's your forgotten self? Jung believed that confronting the shadow is not an act of self-punishment. It's an act of self-rescue. Until you make the unconscious conscious, he said, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Think about that. The parts of you you've exiled are still alive. And if you don't face them, they'll surface unconsciously through anxiety, projection, addiction, perfectionism, passive aggression. You're not escaping them. You're just letting them rule you from the shadows. Let's make this personal. You may think, I'm not angry, but you're exhausted from suppressing resentment. You say, I'm easygoing, but secretly you sabotage anyone who tries to control you. You insist, I'm fine, but your body tells another story. Tension, insomnia, fatigue. The persona says, this is who I am. The shadow whispers, but this is what you've denied. And until you listen, the dissonance will grow louder. Until you welcome it, you'll remain split, fragmented. But here's the miracle. Your shadow isn't just darkness. It holds your buried light too. Every part of you that was too passionate, too honest, too intense, too creative, too different, and therefore silenced, lives in the shadow. Jung called this the golden shadow, the parts of ourselves we disown not because they are bad, but because they are powerful. Society may have told you your sensitivity was weakness, your imagination was childish, your depth was too much. So you played the part. You wore the mask. But now you are standing at the threshold, and behind the door is not a monster. It's the rest of you. Meeting your shadow isn't a weekend workshop. It's not a viral quote or a meditation playlist. It's a gritty, often uncomfortable, lifelong reckoning with your inner truth. But it is also the birthplace of self-compassion. When you stop judging your pain, authentic power when you reclaim your voice, creative fire when you unchain the parts that once danced in secret, deeper relationships, when others meet you not as a projection but as a person, in a world that rewards the persona, polished, safe, sanitized. This kind of wholeness is radical, but only in wholeness do we find peace. One of Jung's most vital insights was that the goal of life is not to be good, it is to be whole. You are not here to be perfect. You are not here to be pleasing. You are here to become yourself, fully, courageously, without apology. And that means befriending the parts of you you once rejected to be accepted. It means looking in the mirror and saying, I see the part of me that wants to scream. I see the part of me that's still grieving. I see the part of me that sabotages, manipulates, craves, lies, and I will not exile them anymore. And I will not exile them anymore. I will listen. I will learn. I will integrate. Because without them, I am only half alive. This is where the persona begins to serve you rather than imprison you, when it's no longer your identity but a tool, a role you play, not the soul you abandon. You can show up to the world with grace and power because you know who's underneath the mask. You're no longer afraid to be seen because you've seen yourself first. In our final chapter, we'll ask, what does life look like after the persona trap? We'll explore the journey of integration, the power of authenticity in a performative world, and how living without the mask isn't just possible. It's the most meaningful path we can walk. Because in the end, freedom isn't found in being liked, it's found in being real. The courage to be real, open in tone, resolute, clear, liberating, a soft crescendo toward freedom. So here you are. The stage is empty. The lights are off. The mask lies at your feet. You're no longer playing a role. You're no longer rehearsing lines for applause. The persona has lost its grip, not through rebellion, but through awakening. And now a new question rises, quiet but fierce. How do I live from here? Because this is the true frontier, not just the collapse of the false self, not just the confrontation with your shadow, but the commitment to something far more radical, living as who you truly are, not as who you're expected to be, not as a brand or an identity or a mask, but as a whole, complex, breathing human being. Jung wrote, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But he never said it would be easy. He said it would be necessary, and more than that, beautiful. Let's talk about what life feels like after the persona trap. It's quieter, not because you've become small, but because you're no longer shouting to be seen. You don't need to impress, not because you don't care, but because you finally know your worth isn't something you perform. You don't chase connection, you create it. You don't perform confidence, you embody it. You don't curate authenticity, you live it, even when it's messy. And yes, it is messy. People may pull away when you stop being who they want you to be. Some will miss the mask, the version of you that made them comfortable. Let them go, because the people who stay, they see you, and that's worth everything. Living beyond the persona doesn't mean you walk around spilling your soul to everyone. It means your outer life and inner life begin to match. Your roles serve your truth, not replace it. You can be the leader who admits mistakes, the teacher who still learns, the partner who doesn't pretend to be invulnerable, the creator who stops editing their soul. It means presence replaces performance, and realness becomes your form of rebellion. Let's get honest. This world is still obsessed with image. Authenticity is trending, but only when it's packaged correctly, pretty, palatable, marketable. even vulnerability can become a persona if we're not careful. So, how do you stay real? You build a relationship with your inner world that's stronger than your need for outer approval. You learn to self reflect, not self censor. You notice when you're slipping back into the mask and gently return to yourself. You speak truths even when your voice shakes. You rest even when your guilt says you haven't earned it. You say no even when they expect a yes. You stop editing yourself in real time. Jung believed this wasn't just about psychology, it was about the soul. He wrote, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries." This is not about becoming someone new. It's about returning to who you were before the world told you who to be. That child who laughed too loud, who drew dragons and told the truth, who didn't care how they looked in the mirror, only how it felt to be alive. That child wasn't a persona. That child was presence, and now you are old enough to protect that part of you, to parent it, to build a life around it. You don't shed the mask once, you shed it every day you choose truth over image. Every time you say, "I'd rather be real than perfect." Let's be clear. This isn't a call to abandon society or roles or ambition. It's a call to play roles consciously, to create from authenticity, not from fear. You can still lead, love, teach, perform, but now you know who's behind it. You carry your shadow, not in shame, but in awareness. You wear your persona like a tailored jacket, useful, temporary, never mistaken for skin. And if you ever start to believe the mask again, you pause, you breathe, you remember. You remember what it cost to finally meet yourself. You remember that approval is a contract, and you've stopped signing away your soul. In a world of mirrors, become a window. Let others see through the surface into something real. Your courage gives them permission to drop their own masks. Because the deepest gift you can offer this world is not your perfection, it is your presence, not your polish, your truth, not your persona, you. So now I leave you with the question we began with, but this time you can answer it from the inside. How much of you is real? And if the answer is still, "I don't know," then good. That means you're still searching, not for the next mask, but for the miracle of your own becoming. Welcome home.